The steam rose from the plastic container, carrying the rich aroma of bean soup through the crisp November air. Maria Elena's hands trembled slightly, not from the cold, but from exhaustion. She had scrubbed floors for 6 hours straight at the towering glass building behind her, and her shift would resume in exactly 20 minutes. 20 precious minutes to nourish herself before returning to the world of empty offices, overflowing trash cans, and the relentless hum of floor polishers. The small bench in Zuccotti Park had become her dining room for the past 7 years. From this spot, she could watch the hurried parade of Wall Street power brokers, their expensive coats flapping in the wind as they rushed between meetings worth millions of dollars. Sometimes she wondered what it felt like to walk that fast with such purpose, to know your time was valued at hundreds of dollars per hour instead of the $12 she earned. She stirred the soup gently, watching the small pieces of bone and beans swirl together. This batch would last 4 more days if she was careful. She had become an expert at stretching ingredients, a skill born of necessity after Miguel's scaffolding had collapsed 3 years ago, leaving her alone with 3 children and a mountain of medical bills. That's when she noticed him. The elderly man sat at the opposite end of her bench, his posture a question mark against the grey sky. His suit might once have commanded respect in the boardrooms towering above them, but now it hung from his frame like forgotten laundry, wrinkled, stained at the cuffs, with a tie loosened as if its owner had given up halfway through the day. His eyes remained fixed on the concrete between his scuffed leather shoes, one hand clutching his stomach in a gesture Maria Elena recognized immediately. Hunger had a universal language. She had spoken it many times herself. Without thinking, she rose from her spot and crossed the short distance between them, the steam from her container creating a small cloud in front of her face. "Excuse me, senor," she said softly, her Puerto Rican accent wrapping around the English words. "You look like you could use something warm today." When he looked up, Maria Elena felt something catch in her chest. His eyes, pale blue and clouded with what might have been cataracts, seemed to belong to a man who had once seen very clearly, but now found himself in a world gone blurry. Those eyes widened slightly at her presence, as if he had grown accustomed to being invisible. "I couldn't possibly," he began, but his stomach betrayed him with an audible growl. "Please," Maria Elena insisted, already dividing her soup into the container's lid. "I made too much anyway." The lie came easily. Acts of kindness often required small untruths. His hands, liver-spotted and trembling, reached for the offered food with a hesitation that suggested he was unaccustomed to accepting help. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice carrying the remnants of what had once been a commanding tone. "I haven't eaten since... I can't remember when." Maria Elena settled beside him, careful to leave respectful space between them. "My name is Maria Elena," she offered, watching as he took his first spoonful with the deliberate focus of someone savoring a forgotten pleasure. "Thomas," he replied after swallowing. "My name is Thomas." They ate in silence for several minutes, the sounds of Manhattan creating a backdrop to their shared meal. Finally, Thomas spoke again, his voice stronger now that food had entered his system. "Why would you share your lunch with a stranger?" Maria Elena considered the question. "We are only strangers until we share something, no? Now we are just 2 people enjoying soup on a Tuesday." A hint of a smile touched Thomas's face, transforming it momentarily. "It's been a while since anyone saw me as a person." "That is the problem with this city," Maria Elena said, gesturing toward the streams of people flowing past them. "Everyone looks, but nobody sees." Thomas nodded slowly. "I was one of them once, looking without seeing. And now?" His eyes grew distant. "Now I'm neither seen nor seeing, just existing. My family hasn't spoken to me in 3 years." His voice cracked slightly. "My own fault, really." Maria Elena touched his arm gently. "Everyone deserves dignity. And second chances. Even old fools who threw everything away? Especially them," she said with a small smile. "God never abandons anyone completely." Thomas looked down at the empty container in his hands. "I don't know about God, but I'm grateful for this soup. And your kindness." Maria Elena checked her watch, 5 minutes remaining in her break. "I must go back to work now, but I come here every day at the same time. If you are here tomorrow, we can share soup again." "I couldn't take your food again." "It is not taking if it is offered freely," Maria Elena interrupted. "Besides, food tastes better when shared, no?" As she stood to leave, Thomas looked up at her with eyes that seemed slightly clearer than before. "Why would you do this twice?" Maria Elena adjusted her cleaning uniform, because once is chance, twice is choice, and I choose to believe that small kindnesses can change big things. She walked away toward the towering office building where mops and buckets awaited her, unaware that the simple act of sharing her soup had already set in motion changes larger than she could imagine. The following day, Maria Elena carried 2 containers to the park, her usual soup and a small sandwich wrapped in wax paper. She had woken 30 minutes earlier to prepare it, using the cheapest bread and a thin spread of peanut butter. The extra food meant her children would have slightly smaller portions that evening, but she had told them about the elderly man in the park, and 10-year-old Lucia had insisted they should help. Even when we have little, we have more than some, Lucia had declared with the simple wisdom children sometimes possess. Maria Elena scanned the park, her breath visible in the cold air. For a moment, she thought Thomas might not return, but then she spotted him on the same bench, hunched against the wind in his worn suit. He looked up as she approached, surprise flickering across his weathered face. "You actually came back," he said, the corners of his mouth lifting slightly. "I am a woman of my word," Maria Elena replied, settling beside him and arranging the containers between them. "I brought something extra today." Thomas stared at the simple sandwich, as though it were a rare delicacy. "You shouldn't have gone to the trouble." "No trouble," she assured him, pushing the food closer. "My daughter Lucia helped make it this morning. She was worried you might still be hungry after just soup." Thomas unwrapped the sandwich with reverent care. "Have you told your family about me?" "Of course. We pray for those in need before dinner each night. Now we have a name to include." Thomas took a small bite, chewing slowly. "I used to have family dinners. Long time ago now." Maria Elena sipped her soup, allowing comfortable silence to settle between them. Unlike yesterday, Thomas seemed more present, less lost in the fog of hunger and isolation. His shoulders remained hunched, but his eyes tracked the movement of pedestrians with newfound awareness. "I was an executive once," he said suddenly, his voice carrying a hint of its former authority. "Technology company. Had the corner office on the 40th floor of a building not unlike that one." He gestured toward a gleaming skyscraper across the street. "What happened?" Maria Elena asked gently. Thomas's face tightened. "The usual story. Success, then arrogance. Drinking to celebrate became drinking to cope. Bad decisions compounded by worse ones. My son tried to help, but..." He shook his head. "Pride is a terrible thing when it prevents you from accepting the hand reaching out to save you." "Your son? Does he live in the city?" "David," Thomas said, the name emerging like a prayer. "Last I knew, he was doing well. Very well, actually. Followed in my footsteps, but without my mistakes. He tried to get me into rehab 3 times. Third time I walked out after 2 days and told him not to waste his time on me anymore." Thomas's voice cracked. He listened. Maria Elena touched his arm lightly. "Children never truly give up on their parents, even when they must step away for their own well-being." Thomas shook his head. "Some bridges can't be rebuilt once burned." "I disagree," Maria Elena said firmly. "Where there is life, there is possibility. My husband Miguel died in a construction accident 3 years ago. That bridge is truly gone. But you and your son, you both still walk this earth. The bridge may be damaged, but it can be repaired." The park had grown busier as lunchtime approached. Suited men and women hurried past, carrying designer coffee cups and gourmet salads in plastic containers. Some glanced at Thomas with thinly veiled discomfort before quickening their pace. "They see me as a cautionary tale," Thomas observed, following Maria Elena's gaze. "Or a ghost of what might happen if they make one wrong turn in life. People fear what reminds them of their own fragility," Maria Elena replied. "I clean their offices at night. I see the photographs on their desks, smiling families, vacation homes. They work endless hours for these things, never knowing how quickly they can disappear." Thomas nodded. "I had all that. Corner office, summer house in the Hamptons, respect that bordered on fear from my colleagues." A bitter smile crossed his face. "Now I'm invisible to the same people who once returned my calls within minutes." "Not invisible to everyone," Maria Elena reminded him. Thomas studied her face. "Why aren't you afraid of ending up like me?" "Who says I am not afraid?" She smiled softly. "I work 3 extra hours each weekend cleaning the executive bathrooms for emergency money. My children wear donated clothes. We are always one illness away from disaster." She straightened her back. "But fear is a poor advisor. Kindness is better." "Kindness got you a half-empty stomach," Thomas pointed out. And good company, she countered. An even trade. The sound of her phone alarm interrupted them. I must return to work, Maria Elena said, gathering her container. Will you? Thomas began, then stopped himself. Tomorrow, same time, she assured him. Perhaps we can continue our conversation. As she stood, she noticed Thomas carefully folding the sandwich wrapper and slipping it into his pocket. Thank you, he said, meeting her eyes directly. Not just for the food. Maria Elena nodded, understanding what remained unsaid. Tomorrow, then. As she walked back toward the office tower, she felt eyes on her back and turned to see Thomas watching her departure. For the first time, he sat slightly straighter on the bench, as though something had shifted inside him, something small but significant, like a key turning in a rusted lock. That evening, as Maria Elena prepared dinner with her children in their tiny apartment in Queens, she added an extra spoonful of rice to the pot. When Lucia asked why, Maria Elena simply said, "For the blessings we cannot yet see." In her prayers that night, she included Thomas by name, asking not for his material comfort but for his heart to find peace and for broken family bonds to heal. She did not know that across the city, in an executive penthouse overlooking Central Park, another prayer was being spoken, one that would soon intersect with hers in ways neither could imagine. For 5 weeks, their ritual continued. Each day, Maria Elena would arrive at 11 o'clock sharp, carrying her containers of homemade food. Each day, Thomas would be waiting, gradually looking less like a man who had surrendered to the streets, and more like someone beginning to remember his own worth. Small changes appeared, his tie properly knotted, his shoes wiped clean, his hair combed. He had found a shelter that offered showers, he explained, and a church that provided laundry services once a week. These were modest victories, but Maria Elena celebrated each one as though they were monumental achievements. "How you have your dignity back in your eyes," she told him one afternoon as they shared sweet potato soup, her special Friday recipe. "Hard to maintain dignity when you're sleeping on park benches," Thomas replied, though without the bitter edge that had colored his earlier comments. "Dignity is not where you sleep, but how you carry yourself through your troubles," Maria Elena countered. "My grandmother raised 7 children in a house with dirt floors in Puerto Rico. She scrubbed other people's laundry on a washboard from sunrise to sunset, but she walked like she was carrying the flag in a parade." Thomas smiled at the image. "She sounds like you." "No," Maria Elena laughed softly. "I am trying to be like her, still trying every day." The November sky had darkened early, threatening rain. Fine droplets had already begun to fall, creating delicate patterns on the surface of their soup. Neither made a move to seek shelter. These 20 minutes had become sacred to them both, a brief sanctuary in lives defined by struggle. "I've been thinking about David," Thomas said suddenly, his spoon pausing midway to his mouth. "My son." Maria Elena nodded encouragingly, but remained silent, having learned that Thomas needed space to form his thoughts when discussing painful subjects. "I saw a young executive yesterday who reminded me of him. Same confident stride, same way of checking his watch." Thomas's voice softened. "Made me wonder if David still does that. Checks his watch with a little flick of his wrist, just like I taught him when he was 10 and I gave him his first timepiece." "Have you considered trying to contact him?" Maria Elena asked gently. Thomas stared into his soup. "Every day. And every day I convince myself it's better to leave him in peace. He has his own life now. Successful, according to what little I've managed to learn. CEO of his own tech company, Morrison Tech Solutions. Married. Maybe even children I've never met. Grandchildren are a blessing you should not deny yourself. Or them," Maria Elena said. "What would I say after all this time? Sorry I was a drunk who rejected your help and disappeared for 3 years. The truth is always a good place to start," she replied simply. Thomas shook his head. "Some truths are too heavy to be received, or too heavy to carry alone," Maria Elena countered. She set her spoon down and turned to face him directly. "Thomas, in the weeks we have shared these meals, you have told me many stories about your mistakes, but you have also shown me who you truly are, a man of intelligence and kindness who lost his way. Don't you think your son deserves to see who his father really is beneath the mistakes?" Thomas looked away, his profile sharp against the darkening sky. "What if he doesn't want to see? Then at least you will know you tried. Right now, you punish both yourself and him with this silence." The rain began to fall more steadily now, but neither moved. Water droplets clung to Thomas's silver hair like tiny crystals. I wouldn't even know where to begin finding him, Thomas murmured. You know his company name. In this age, that is enough to find anyone, Maria Elena said. My son Miguel Jr. could help. He is good with computers at the library. Thomas looked alarmed. No, I couldn't involve your family in my problems. They are already involved, Maria Elena said with a gentle smile. Lucia asks about you every night. Carlos saves jokes he hears at school to share with you. Even little Miguel Jr., who speaks so little, asked if Mama's park friend would join us for dinner someday. Thomas's eyes widened. They don't even know me. They know you are important to me. That is enough. A particularly heavy raindrop splashed into Thomas's soup, breaking the surface tension. He watched the ripples spread, seemingly transfixed by their movement. I had everything once, he whispered. Corner office, respect, family. I traded it all for the temporary comfort of not facing my own failures. He looked up at Maria Elena, his eyes suddenly clear and focused. But you have nothing by the world's measure, yet you've shown more generosity than anyone I've known. How is that possible? Maria Elena considered his question seriously. Perhaps because I never had enough to believe that possessions could save me. I learned early that only people save people. Thunder rumbled in the distance, and the rain intensified. Other park occupants hurried for cover, collars turned up against the weather. A young businessman ran past them, expensive leather briefcase held over his head as improvised protection. We should find shelter, Maria Elena said, beginning to gather their things. Wait, Thomas said, reaching for her hand. I want to say something first. He took a deep breath. If I could go back and change things with David, I would. But since I can't, perhaps I can go forward differently. If you would help me find him, I'd like to try. Maria Elena squeezed his hand. Of course, we can start tomorrow. As they stood to leave, the rain suddenly intensified, becoming a proper downpour. They hurried toward the awning of a nearby coffee shop, laughing despite the soaking. Under the temporary shelter, Thomas looked at Maria Elena with an expression she hadn't seen before, one of determination mixed with fragile hope. Thank you, he said simply, for the soup, for the company, for seeing you. Maria Elena finished for him. Yes, Thomas nodded. For seeing me. Neither noticed the tall figure watching them from inside a black town car, idling at the curb, nor the look of stunned recognition that crossed the observer's face as the vehicle pulled away into the rainy Manhattan streets. The next day brought a lighter rain, more mist than downpour, that shrouded Zuccotti Park in a dreamlike haze. Maria Elena arrived with her container of sweet potato soup, the last portion from Friday's batch. The weather had kept many of the usual lunchtime crowd away, making the park feel eerily deserted. Thomas was already at their bench, his shoulders hunched against the damp chill. He seemed distracted today, his eyes scanning the surroundings more frequently than usual. When Maria Elena sat beside him, he jumped slightly. Forgive me, he said with a forced smile. Bad night at the shelter. Too many ghosts walking through my dreams. Maria Elena nodded understandingly as she divided the soup. Dreams have a way of bringing our fears to the surface. Or our hopes, Thomas added quietly. I dreamed about David last night. We were in our old summer house, fishing off the dock like we used to when he was a boy. He accepted the container with trembling hands. It felt so real I could smell the lake water. Perhaps it is a sign, Maria Elena suggested, watching steam rise from her portion, that your heart is ready to try again. They ate in companionable silence for several minutes, the soft patter of rain on the surrounding trees creating a gentle backdrop. Maria Elena noticed Thomas had barely touched his soup, instead staring intently at a point over her shoulder. Is something wrong with the food? She asked. No, he assured her quickly. It's delicious as always. He hesitated. I keep having this strange feeling today, like I'm being watched. Maria Elena glanced around the nearly empty park. It is quiet today. Perhaps too quiet for comfort. It's not that, Thomas said, his voice dropping. Ever since last night's dream, I've felt like the past is circling closer somehow. He shook his head. Sounds crazy, I know. Not crazy, Maria Elena replied. Sometimes our hearts sense things before our minds understand them. Thomas nodded absently, still distracted. I've been thinking about what you said yesterday, about finding David. He set his soup container down on the bench between them. What would I even say to him after all this time? Hello, son. Sorry I rejected your help and disappeared for 3 years, but I've been having soup with a kind lady who convinced me to stop being an idiot." Maria Elena laughed softly. "Perhaps leave out the idiot part. But yes, sometimes simple truth is best." "The truth is I failed him," Thomas said, his voice cracking. "As a father, as a role model. I let my pride and my addiction destroy everything." "That is one truth," Maria Elena acknowledged. "But there are others. That you loved him enough to recognize he was right to step away. That you are still his father, regardless of mistakes made. That—" She stopped abruptly, her eyes focusing on something beyond Thomas's shoulder. A tall man in an impeccable charcoal suit was walking directly toward them, his purposeful stride cutting through the misty rain like a ship through fog. Something in his expression, a mixture of determination and disbelief, caused Maria Elena's words to freeze in her throat. Thomas, noticing her sudden silence, turned to follow her gaze. The color drained from his face. The approaching man slowed as he neared them, his confident stride faltering. He stopped completely about 6 feet away, his hands clenching and unclenching at his sides. He was younger than Thomas by perhaps 30 years, but the resemblance was unmistakable. The same jawline, the same intense blue eyes, though the younger man's remained clear and sharp. For a long moment, no one spoke. The misting rain continued to fall around them, beading on the expensive wool of the younger man's coat and the worn polyester of Thomas's suit jacket. "Dad," the man finally said, the single word carrying years of questions. Thomas stood slowly, his legs unsteady. "David." David took a half-step forward, then stopped, emotion warring across his features. "I thought, the investigators said you might be—" His voice, confident and strong at first, now faltered. "Dead?" Thomas finished for him, a sad smile crossing his weathered face. "Not yet, though there were times I wished I was." David's eyes darted between Thomas and Maria Elena, confusion evident. "I've had private investigators looking for you for 18 months. I've checked every shelter, every hospital, every program in the tri-state area." His voice gained a hard edge. "Meanwhile, you've been here? In Zuccotti Park?" "Not the whole time," Thomas said quietly. "I've been moving around, staying where I could." David's gaze fell to the soup containers, then to Maria Elena. "And who is—" Before Thomas could answer, Maria Elena stood and extended her hand. "Maria Elena Diaz. I am a friend of your father's." David shook her hand automatically, his training in social niceties momentarily overriding his shock. "David Morrison, He looked again at the soup containers, comprehension slowly dawning. "You were sharing your lunch with him?" "We share with each other," Maria Elena corrected gently. "Food, stories, friendship." David's expression softened slightly as he looked at her, then hardened again when his attention returned to his father. 3 years, Dad. 3 years of silence. Do you have any idea what that did to Mom? To me?" "I know," Thomas whispered, his voice barely audible above the soft rainfall. "I know, and I have no right to ask forgiveness." "Then why are you here?" "Why now?" David demanded. Thomas gestured helplessly toward Maria Elena. "Because she helped me see that my pride was less important than trying to make amends, even if those amends aren't accepted." David ran a hand through his rain-dampened hair, his composure slipping. "I looked for you everywhere, everywhere. I thought you were dead in some alley or unidentified in a morgue somewhere." His voice broke. "Do you know what that's like? To imagine your father dying alone because you weren't good enough to find him in time." "David," Thomas said, taking a tentative step forward, "you were always good enough. I was the one who failed." David stepped back, maintaining the distance between them. "I have a company to run, meetings to attend. I can't do this right now." He reached into his suit jacket and withdrew a business card, holding it out with a hand that trembled slightly. "My private number is on the back. If you're serious about whatever this is, call me." Thomas accepted the card as reverently as if he'd been handed a priceless artifact. "I will." David nodded curtly, then turned to Maria Elena. "Thank you," he said stiffly, "for whatever kindness you've shown him." As he turned to leave, Thomas called after him. "David, wait." David paused but didn't turn around. "How did you find me?" Thomas asked. "After all this time, how did you happen to be here today?" David's shoulders tensed. "Pure chance. I was walking back from a meeting at Goldman Sachs. I saw you yesterday too from my car, but I convinced myself I was imagining things. He half turned, his profile sharp against the misty backdrop. "I've seen your ghost on street corners and park benches for 3 years, Dad. This time I had to know if it was really you." With that he continued walking, soon disappearing into the light fog that enveloped the park's edge. Thomas sank back onto the bench, the business card clutched in his trembling fingers. "He hates me," he whispered, "and he has every right to." Maria Elena sat beside him, placing her hand gently over his. "That was not hatred, Thomas. That was pain. Pain caused by love that never died." Thomas turned to her, his eyes brimming with tears. "What do I do now?" "You call him," Maria Elena said simply, "and you begin again." As they sat together in the gentle rain, the soup between them growing cold, Maria Elena felt something shift in the air around them, as though invisible threads of fate, long tangled, had suddenly straightened into a clear path forward. 6 months passed with the swift inevitability of seasons changing. Winter had blanketed Manhattan in snow, then surrendered to spring's tentative warmth, which had in turn blossomed into early summer. Maria Elena stood before the mirror in her small bathroom, smoothing the front of her new dress, a simple navy blue garment with white trim that her daughter Lucia had insisted looked perfect on her. Outside, a car horn sounded, 3 short beeps, their prearranged signal. "Mama, they're here!" Carlos called from the living room window, his voice tinged with the excitement that had filled their apartment all morning. Thanksgiving dinner at the Morrison home in Westchester. The invitation had arrived 3 weeks ago, hand-delivered by Thomas himself during one of his regular visits. David insisted, he had explained, a touch of wonder still present in his voice whenever he spoke of his son. "The whole family will be there. He said it wouldn't be right without you and the children." The reconciliation had not been instantaneous or simple. That rainy day in the park had been just the beginning, the first painful step in a journey marked by difficult conversations, tentative forgiveness, and the slow rebuilding of trust. Thomas had called the number on David's card that very evening, his hands shaking so badly that Maria Elena had needed to dial for him. The first meeting had taken place in David's office, neutral territory, with Maria Elena present at both men's request. "You're the bridge between us," Thomas had explained. "The only reason this chance exists at all." Through winter, Thomas had moved into a modest apartment provided by David, begun attending recovery meetings daily, and started volunteering at a rehabilitation center for executives dealing with addiction. "Helping others who made the same mistakes," he had explained to Maria Elena over one of their now weekly lunch meetings. "It helps me understand my own journey better." David, meanwhile, had been true to his word about wanting to thank Maria Elena properly. After discreetly learning where she worked, he had arranged a meeting that had changed everything. "We need someone with your integrity in our organization," he had told her, sitting across from her in a small cafe near her apartment. "Someone who understands the value of people beyond their titles or bank accounts." Maria Elena had initially declined his offer of an administrative position, believing it to be charity. "I clean offices," she had explained gently. "I have no experience in your world." "You rebuilt a broken man with nothing but soup and kindness," David had countered. "That's the kind of experience money can't buy, and universities can't teach." Now, as Maria Elena gathered her children and locked their apartment door, she reflected on how completely their lives had transformed. Her position as human resources assistant at Morrison Tech Solutions had come with training, benefits, and a salary that had allowed her family to breathe for the first time in years. The children had new clothes, regular dental checkups, and a college fund that grew each month. The black town car waiting at the curb gleamed in the summer sunshine. Thomas stood beside it, looking nothing like the broken man she had first encountered in the park. Sober for 5 months now, he had regained the dignified bearing that his son had inherited. His eyes, once clouded by shame and despair, now crinkled at the corners as he smiled and opened the car door for them. "The guest of honor arrives," he said warmly, embracing Maria Elena and each of her children in turn. "David has been pacing the house all morning, making sure everything is perfect." The drive to Westchester passed in comfortable conversation, with Thomas pointing out landmarks along the way and entertaining the children with stories from his youth. Watching him with her family, Maria Elena marveled at how natural it felt, as though they had all been connected long before that November day in Zuccotti Park. The Morrison home was not the mansion Maria Elena had imagined, but rather a spacious colonial-style house set back from a tree-lined street. David met them at the door, his wife Sarah and their 2 young children beside him. "At last," he said, embracing Maria Elena with genuine warmth, "the woman who gave me back my father." The afternoon unfolded in a blur of introductions, conversation, and delicious aromas from the kitchen. Maria Elena's children integrated seamlessly with David's, disappearing into the backyard for an impromptu soccer game. She offered to help with dinner preparations and found herself working alongside Sarah, their conversation flowing easily despite their different backgrounds. "He talks about you constantly, you know," Sarah confided, as they arranged sweet potatoes in a baking dish. "Both of them do. The woman who saved 2 generations of Morrison men with a bowl of soup." Maria Elena laughed softly. "I think they give me too much credit. All I did was see another human being when others looked away." "That's exactly why you deserve the credit," Sarah replied, squeezing her arm affectionately. When they finally gathered around the dining table, extended to accommodate their blended group, Maria Elena felt a momentary sense of unreality. 6 months ago, she had been scrubbing floors in the midnight hours, stretching every dollar to feed her children. Now she sat in this beautiful home, surrounded by new friends who treated her as an equal. After David said grace, Thomas raised his glass of sparkling cider, his eyes finding Maria Elena across the table. "I'd like to propose a toast," he said, his voice strong and clear. "To Maria Elena Diaz, who taught me that sometimes the greatest gifts come in the simplest packages." His voice wavered slightly. "You didn't just share your soup with a hungry old man. You restored my belief that I was still worthy of being seen, of being helped, of being loved." Maria Elena felt tears forming as Thomas continued. "When you found me on that bench, I had given up, not just on myself, but on the possibility that anything could ever change. You showed me that the smallest act of kindness can create ripples that transform lives in ways we could never imagine." He raised his glass higher, "To Maria Elena, who reminded me that it's never too late to begin again." As glasses clinked around the table, Maria Elena looked at the faces surrounding her. Thomas reclaiming his dignity, David reunited with his father, their family and hers, connected by an invisible thread of compassion that had begun with a simple bowl of soup. "I have learned as much from all of you," she said through her tears, "that when we reach beyond our own struggles to acknowledge another's pain, we often find our own burdens lightened. That families can be healed and new ones created through nothing more complicated than the decision to care." Later, as twilight settled over the neighborhood and the children played one last game in the yard, Maria Elena stood on the back porch with Thomas and David, watching the fireflies begin to emerge. "I never thought we'd be here," David admitted quietly, "after 3 years of searching to find you through pure chance." "Not chance," Thomas interrupted gently. "Grace." Maria Elena nodded, understanding completely. In her 52 years of life, through hardship and loss, joy and struggle, she had come to recognize the invisible hand of divine timing, how people entered our lives precisely when needed, how kindness offered without expectation often returned multiplied. As darkness fell and stars appeared overhead, Maria Elena thought about the countless invisible connections between people, how a simple choice to acknowledge another's humanity could set in motion changes that reverberated through many lives. She thought of her soup, made from the humblest ingredients, stretched to feed as many as possible. How like love it was, always enough when shared freely, somehow multiplying in the giving. Life would continue to bring challenges. Her job would have difficult days. Thomas would face ongoing temptations in his recovery. David would struggle with the demands of his company and family. But something fundamental had shifted for all of them, a recognition that no one walks alone, that we are all both givers and receivers in the great economy of compassion. In a world that often seemed cold and disconnected, they had rediscovered an ancient truth, that the simplest acts of kindness, a shared meal, a moment of true seeing, a hand extended in friendship, contained the power to heal wounds, bridge divides, and restore what had been lost. That we are never so poor that we cannot offer something to another, and never so rich that we need nothing from others. Maria Elena knew that tomorrow she would return to her apartment, to her routines, to the ordinary struggles of daily life, but she would carry with her the certainty that had been affirmed today, that love offered freely, without expectation of return, was never wasted. that even the smallest light could illuminate the darkest corners. That hope, like soup shared on a cold day, warmed from the inside out. And somewhere someone else sat alone on a bench, waiting for another soul brave enough to see past appearances to the human being within. Perhaps tomorrow, inspired by her own experience, Maria Elena would be that person for someone new, and the ripples would continue, expanding outward in ever-widening circles of compassion and connection, changing the world one simple act of kindness at a time.